Welcome to the EQ Fit podcast. Our mission is to equip people to prosper in every aspect of their life. Whether you're at home or in the workplace, we explore practical ways of improving success, satisfaction, finding balance, and building enjoyable and beneficial relationships. Thank you for joining us. The focus for today is trust. There are so many definitions of trust. There are so many misconceptions about what trust is. But I really want to focus in on not just what is trust, but how do you build trust with other people and what's at the root of trust. Not just the definition itself, but what is trust all about? What does it do? What are the outcomes of trust? Well, just from a high level, trust is a fundamental part of every relationship, every organization, every society. And you've been there. If you've been in a place where there's high levels of trust, then things tend to go better. They go more smoothly. There's more collaboration. There's more innovation. But when you're in a place where there's low levels of trust, then it's very much a non-productive place to be. Things don't get done as well or as quickly. There's a lot of challenges with all of that. It is the cornerstone of success in business, leadership, and personal interactions. And of course, we're talking about trust here. In a world that's increasingly complex and driven by technology, trust has become even more essential in navigating the challenges of leadership and everything that comes with that. Trust isn't just a concept. It's an emotion that drives behavior and drives decision-making. Without it, relationships falter, productivity suffers, and progress stagnates. And you've been there. You've experienced times in your life, whether it's in your professional life or your personal life, where there's been a lack of trust. And you know what that feels like, you know what that looks like, and you've seen the outcomes when there are low levels of trust. I want to share another story with you, true story. Several years ago, I was asked to facilitate a major culture change within an organization. I started with my normal organizational diagnosis methodology to identify the current reality of their culture. And frankly, it wasn't good. As a matter of fact, that's maybe the understatement of the year. It was toxic. It was a toxic culture. Now, there are some principles that I know to be true. Organizations get the culture they tolerate. When I entered into this project with this organization, they had seen many years of consistent growth. So as the company grew, many of the signs of toxicity were masked by the need to serve customers and to grow capacity. So the culture took a back seat to getting higher revenue levels, bringing in the new equipment, the new processes, the new procedures, all of those things that help to grow a company. But the problem was there was a rotten core. There was a culture gap that was creating some serious issues within the organization. Now, when I brought my findings to the owner, it was one of those light bulb moments for the owner. He knew there were issues, but he could not figure out the root cause of the issues. Things seem to be working well. They continue to grow. They continue to get new customers. But there was just this underlying current of struggle and strife and just things that it was really hard for him to figure out what the root cause of all of that was. And he realized as I was talking to him that the common thread was a lack of trust. As a matter of fact, distrust was being actively promoting. Now, this is where we entered into a fascinating conversation about the differences between trust and loyalty. And so many people confuse trust and loyalty. They are not the same things. Now, before I share that conversation with you, I want you to know this owner is a highly intelligent person, but his intelligence is primarily in IQ, in TQ, which is technical intelligence, and AQ, acquired intelligence. He did not have high levels of EQ or emotional intelligence. So when it came to a skill of emotional intelligence called emotional literacy, it's a skill that allows you to understand the differences between different emotions, how those impact you, and frankly, how they impact others around you. And without a high level of emotional literacy, it's very easy for one emotion to look a lot like another. And frankly, loyalty isn't as much of an emotion as it is a commitment. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I was able to help him understand that while trust and loyalty could be aligned with each other, they are very different things. Loyalty without trust almost always turns political. But loyalty coming out of trust is far more productive. So his organization had become very much an us versus them culture. Every department practiced blame fixing at a very high level. Collaboration only happened when it was absolutely necessary. And then large amounts of time and energy were being focused on who gets to set the rules, who gets their way when it comes to working together. Now, this is the type of situation that requires immediate and intensive intervention. That started with leadership. There's a friend of mine told me a saying one time that I guess I'd never heard it before, but it really speaks well, and it's very graphic. So, brace yourself, here it comes. The fish rots from the head down. So in an organization, that's leadership, right? The head of the organization is leadership. And I just think that's a very graphic way to say that, but it's also very descriptive. So the remedy had to start with leadership as well. We had to create a guiding coalition of leaders that would lead this organization out of the toxic culture they were in and into a culture that would be more productive and be more engaging for employees. The beginning of this started very small, but it had a profound impact. Trust had to be built between each of the leaders. This included practices of a positive nature. Now, the principle that we put in place to guide this trust-building process between leaders is simply assume positive intent. I'm going to say that again. Assume positive intent. Think about what that means. If we assume somebody's got nefarious goals behind what they're doing, or there's some paranoia in us about, they're trying to go behind our back, if you assume negative intent, that's where your brain goes. But if you assume positive intent, it removes a lot of the triggers, it removes a lot of the roadblocks to building trust, and frankly, trust is the currency of getting things done, especially for leaders. For leaders, trust is the currency of getting things done through other people. And if you don't have very much trust, it's going to be difficult to get things done. So taking this principle of assuming positive intent, we don't assume other people are making decisions or taking actions to undermine us or harm us or other people. Now, I know this may seem like a very simple concept, but the impact in this organization was immediate as the leaders brought this into the process and truly bought into it. Trust started to increase. Collaboration and innovation were ignited. Now, this started to cascade down into the teams. And this is all scientific. We know why this works. We know all of the moving pieces behind it. But to keep this story kind of short, I'm not going to go into all of that. Love to have conversations with people about how that works. But here's what happened in this organization. The us versus them mentality diminished as the leadership guiding coalition agreed upon shared goals and shared values. That is a trust builder as well, when we really agree upon shared goals and shared values. Slowly but surely, the culture started to improve. People who could not accept this change found themselves out of the organization. Just as simple as that. Most of them opted out on their own. They chose not to be a part of that. They were so ingrained in that us versus them mentality that they could not change. So the political infighting diminished. Loyalty found its foundation in trust instead of in taking sides, instead of a political approach to things. Blame fixing was ruthlessly removed from the organization. It was replaced by a feedback culture where people were encouraged and empowered to declare breakdowns when it was happening. And I don't care who it was in the organization. It didn't matter what your position was. Doesn't matter who you are in the organization. Everyone was given a little card that looked like a credit card. And it says, I declare a breakdown, and it was signed by the owner of the organization. And I'm telling you, you talk about change in culture, all of a sudden, we saw higher levels of engagement. We saw, it's just a much more positive culture. And almost all of that toxicity that had built up over the years was just draining away. And so trust flourished in the organization from that point forward. And it was a beautiful thing to witness and be a part of that culture change initiative with that organization. But at the heart of this success story is the power of trust. At its core, trust is the belief in the reliability, the truth, or the ability of someone or something. It's an emotional bond that fosters confidence, security, and a sense of safety in relationships. Notice so many of these words that I'm using have emotional drivers underneath them. Trust goes beyond just believing in someone's competence. It involves an emotional investment in the belief that the other person will act in everyone's best interest, not just in theirs. In this sense, trust is an emotion, not just a rational calculation. It is a feeling that others will not betray or harm you even when you're vulnerable. Just pause there for a second. Being transparent is difficult in the workplace. Being vulnerable is very difficult in the workplace. But when those things can happen because it's a psychologically safe environment and people have the equality of conversational sharing where they can actually have a voice in what's going on, the capacity increases incredibly. The productivity increases in huge amounts. But we have to get to that place where we see feedback as a gift and where we understand that being vulnerable and transparent only gives us more strength. It doesn't take away from our strength. So if we can see trust for what it really is, it's that ability to believe that we are safe, that we are acting in the best interest of everyone else, and everybody buys into that process. So trust is very much an emotion. As with any emotion, trust can fluctuate depending on experiences, perceptions, and the emotional intelligence of people involved. And we know that to be true. So why is this important? Why are we talking about trust today in this fashion? Well, in today's fast-paced world, with everything that's so interconnected, trust has never been more critical than now. In the workplace, trust influences everything from communication and collaboration to innovation and performance. Leaders who build trust are better positioned to create environments where teams can thrive, where they can innovate, where they can feel empowered. Now, I know for a lot of you listening to this, those words may seem like aspirational dreams, like we'll never get there. Boy, wouldn't it be great if we could get to that place? But we're probably never going to get there because of, now you fill in the blank, because of a person, because of a policy. The reality is you can get to this place faster than you think, but you have to take the small steps necessary to start that snowball running downhill or rolling downhill so that it will gain speed and it will grow as it goes downhill. That's the kind of thing that trust can do. Trust, when ignited, when there is an intention to build trust with others and do it on a solid foundation of shared goals, shared values, shared principles that are good for everybody, trust can grow very, very quickly. And that's where we all want to be. So we understand now a better idea of what trust is and why it's important and why leaders need to have this skill of trust building. But that skill of trust building comes directly out of higher levels of emotional intelligence, because trust in itself is an emotion. Trust is the currency of getting things done. And for leaders, it is the currency of getting things done through other people. It underpins every interaction, and it's the foundation upon which effective leadership and teamwork are built. I use a very simple equation for leaders and, frankly, for salespeople. Connection plus trust equals influence. And influence is what you must have to be able to get things done through other people. Whether you're selling to them, which, by the way, leaders do. They sell their vision, they sell their ideas, their direction to their teams and to their superiors. But it works across the board. It works in our personal lives. If you try to tell people what to do all the time, most people are not going to be very open to that. It's not an authoritarian approach. It is an influential approach. That is the greatest power for a leader, is influence. That is the greatest power for a leader, influence, and the ability to influence others. It isn't having a role or a title or authority just to tell people what to do. That's really the lowest form of leadership that there is. So I want to go back to this trust versus loyalty thing for a minute. I think it's important to focus in on that. While trust and loyalty are often used interchangeably, they are very distinct. Trust is an emotional bond, while loyalty is a commitment or an allegiance to someone or something, often driven by duty or by personal benefit. Loyalty without trust, however, can become political and transactional. In such situations, people may act out of fear of consequences or hope of being rewarded, rather than a genuine belief in a leader's integrity. In contrast, trust is freely given and fosters genuine collaboration, while loyalty without trust can be manipulative and divisive. Now, that's a lot of words to say. Loyalty built out of trust is a good thing and much more productive. But loyalty without trust is a place that is risky. It's difficult to be in that place. So let's continue this concept of what are we doing with trust as a leader? And we're all leaders, as I've said before. We learn to lead ourselves first, and then we lead other people, no matter what your role is, no matter what your authority is. Trust is crucial for effective leadership because it enables leaders to influence without authority, something we just talked about. People follow and support leaders that they trust, not just because their titles or their authority is there, but because they believe in their vision and their values. There's an alignment that happens. And that's a big part of building trust with people, finding common ground, finding alignment. Now, as a leader, you can't effectively get things done through other people without establishing trust. Without trust, teams are unlikely to take risks, to share ideas, or to commit fully to a project. Those are very, very true realities. If you don't have trust, it's going to get very difficult for your team to take those risks, share ideas, and just commit fully to the project, be fully engaged. And one of the key drivers of engagement in organizations, and organizations spend millions and millions of dollars every year doing these climate surveys. I use one that has truly actionable data that comes out of it. So many of these climate surveys really don't give you that. What they give you are, here's your numbers, here's where things are at, good luck. They don't really give you a pathway to change things. So that's why I like the one that I use. It's called Vital Signs. And there's one for a leader, there's one for a team, there's one of those vital signs assessments for an entire organization. But here's the point of what I'm saying. At the very core of the success factors for organizations is trust. It's the one success factor that touches all of the others. I just have this desire to say one ring to rule them all. Sorry about that. Don't know where, well, I do know where that came from. But anyway, trust is a good thing. Trust is something that it's just that common thread that weaves through everything. And if it's there, it enhances things. If it's not there, you don't get the enhancement you want. You don't get the outcomes that you want. So consider the impact of trust in organizations like Google, where when they did their study about the most effective teams, you know what the two things are that came out of that? Psychological safety and an equality of conversational sharing. That's it. It had nothing to do with personalities, had nothing to do with a lot of other things. You know, how skilled people were, you know, how experienced people were. Nope. Two things. Psychological safety, and does everybody get a voice, and an equal voice? So a key aspect of psychological safety is trust. It's been found to be the most critical factor for high-performing teams. Employees who feel safe and trust their leaders are more likely to innovate, to share their ideas openly, and to collaborate effectively. And I'll add this, and to stick around and not be drawn by a few $1,000s more a month at some other company, or I should say a year. A few $1,000s more a month is something to consider. But bottom line, culture is becoming more and more important, even over money, with many generations today. The culture that you work in, the one that is sought after the most, is a culture of trust. I always like to tie in to these conversations we're having a practical way to do whatever it is we're talking about. Because if all we do is think about things and learn about new things, but we don't find practical ways to put them into our lives, to integrate those, then you're kind of left on your own. So let me give you, I'm going to call these life hacks, call them personal or professional life hacks, ways that you can quickly build trust using emotional intelligence, using the 5 primary categories. So we know emotional intelligence plays a pivotal role in building and maintaining trust. Emotional intelligence, or EQ, is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions and the emotions of others. Really, the emotional environment that surrounds us. Trust is deeply rooted in emotional connections. And leaders with high EQ are more capable of building these essential connections and therefore building trust. Now, there are 5 key components of emotional intelligence that we talk about: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skills. So I want to take each of those and tie those directly to building trust, and then give you some very practical ways to grow those 5 competencies so that you can build trust more effectively and more rapidly. Starting with self-awareness, the ability to understand your emotions, how they impact your behavior and your relationships. Leaders who are self-aware recognize how their actions affect others and are more attuned to the emotions of their team members, which helps build trust. It just makes sense, right? So here's 3 ways that you can develop this competency of self-awareness so that you can better build trust with other people. Number 1, journaling. Regularly reflect on your thoughts. By the way, the whole point of journaling isn't to sit down and write something down. It's to put something down and capture it somewhere so you can go reflect on it later. That's the point of journaling. I know a lot of people don't like to journal. That's fine. I didn't used to. I do now. I do now because I see the value and the benefit of it. So writing things down to reflect on what was the situation, what was I thinking, how was I feeling, what did I do? Now reflecting on that, if I could go back and change something and make it better, what would I change? That's the process that I use when I journal that really helps me to grow. And I, as a leader, need to have a mindset of continuous growth, continuous learning. So journaling is one way to grow that. Another is feedback. Seek out honest feedback from colleagues, peers, mentors, how you're perceived in the workplace. That feedback is gold, and feedback is a gift. If you ask for feedback, you're asking for somebody to take a risk, especially if you're the leader and they're one of your team members. So honor that. If you ask for feedback, then you honor that as a gift because that person is taking a risk in giving you that feedback. And then mindfulness practices. And, I'm just kind of redefining mindfulness for myself, taking moments throughout the day to stop and think and reflect and kind of get a sense of where you are mentally and what's going on for you in your brain. To me, that's becoming more and more the definition of mindfulness. So the second competency I want to talk about here is self-regulation, competency of emotional intelligence. Self-regulation is the ability to manage your emotions, especially in stressful or challenging situations. Leaders who can control their reactions are more likely to maintain trust when their teams are under pressure, when there is stress, because as the leader, you're seen as steady, reliable, and fair. Now, here's some ways to develop this self-regulation so that you can build trust more effectively. Pause before responding. So don't just react. Stop. Think about it. When you're faced with a challenging situation, pause to collect your thoughts before you say anything, before you make a decision. This allows you to respond more thoughtfully and more intentionally, which is going to help to build trust. Stress management techniques. Practice stress management strategies such as deep breathing, physical exercise, or just time in nature, whatever it is that allows you to decompress, reduce the stress level so that you can show up for yourself and for other people in a better way. And then the third way to grow self-regulation so that you can build more trust more effectively is establish personal boundaries. This is an important one. Create boundaries that help you manage your workload and maintain emotional balance, which in turn helps to build trust because you're more consistent and you're being more intentional. So the third major category or competency of emotional intelligence is motivation, and specifically what I call intrinsic motivation or internal motivation that's based on your values, your beliefs. It's the drive to achieve goals for reasons beyond personal gain. Leaders who are motivated to serve their team, achieve common goals, and pursue excellence build trust because their intentions are clear and they're aligned with the team's best interests. That is a wonderful way to build trust. How do we develop the skill of motivation? First, goal alignment. Align your personal goals with the goals of your team and your organization and make your intentions transparent. That's where we talked about transparency earlier and how important that is to create that psychologically safe environment that you want. Number two, a commitment to excellence. Set high standards for yourself and communicate your commitment to doing your best for your team and for the good of your team. And the third thing is intrinsic rewards. Focus on intrinsic motivators such as a sense of purpose or the joy of overcoming a challenge. That will help to drive you beyond external rewards or external motivators. And you probably heard me say this before. I'll say it again. External motivators are notoriously unreliable, and they don't last very long. You don't know when you're going to get them. You don't know how good they're going to be, and they just don't last very long. So the fourth major area of emotional intelligence that's going to help us build trust better is empathy. And this is huge when it comes to building trust. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, a true kind of a caring approach. It doesn't mean you change or compromise your thoughts or your decisions. It means that you take the time to listen well and to truly understand another person's feelings, their perspectives, their perceptions of a situation. Leaders who are empathetic build strong, trust-based relationships because they genuinely care about the emotions, the perspectives, and the well-being of their team members. How do we develop this? How do we enhance empathy so that we can build trust more effectively? Active listening, practice being fully present in the moment, not distracted, but really, truly, fully present for the other person, actively listening, focusing on them, reflecting on what they're saying, asking clarifying questions to ensure that you understand. The second way you can build empathy is perspective taking. Regularly put yourself in other people's shoes to understand their emotional state and their view of the situation. And the third way to build empathy is compassionate communication. Use empathetic language in your conversations, especially when addressing challenges, to demonstrate genuine care for others. I'm going to go back to my story about that owner and the culture change for a minute. One of the things that owner did, and he did it honestly, and he did it out of no malice in his heart, but one of the things that he did that did not show empathy was when somebody made a mistake or when they did something a certain way, his question was almost always, "Why did you do it like that?" And pretty much in that tone. Well, I don't know about you, but for me, if I make a mistake or if I do something and somebody looks me in the face and says, "Why did you do it like that?" That sounds like judgment. That does not sound like caring and empathy. Now, I know that owner had good intentions. He was truly trying to figure out how they reasoned through the decision they made, but the way he said it automatically put people on the defensive, which added to the culture problems. And that was one of the things we had to solve in the culture crisis they were in. And that kind of ties us into the last one of the five competencies of emotional intelligence, which is social skills. These are the tools that we use to communicate, to interact, and to build relationships. Leaders with strong social skills foster trust by creating open, transparent, and collaborative environments where everybody feels valued. And you can see how if somebody thinks you're judging them, you're not going to feel safe, you're not going to feel valued, you're going to feel judged, even if that's not your intent. Another principle that we put in place at that organization, besides assume positive intent, was don't assume that you understand things the same way other people do. And that's a two-way street. Don't assume they know how you're understanding it. Don't assume you know how they understand it. A lot of roadblocks and a lot of bottlenecks can be removed when we practice some of these very baseline principles. So, how do we develop these social skills? Effective communication. Practice clear, direct, and honest, open, transparent communication in every interaction to foster openness and to foster trust. Conflict resolution. This is a big one. Learn to handle conflicts constructively by mediating discussions, focusing on solutions, and preserving relationships. Don't judge. Don't blame fix. Don't do those things that add toxicity and take away from trust. Because trust is like a bank account. You're either making deposits into the trust bank account or you're making withdrawals. And the withdrawals happen when somebody feels judged by you or when you say things in a way that has an unintended consequence. There's so many ways you can withdraw trust from that account between you and another person. The goal is to consistently be making deposits of trust and building it. And of course, the last one here is team building activities. Engage in team building exercises to strengthen interpersonal bonds and build a sense of trust among your team members. And there are many wonderful things that you can do. I do this in workshops and seminars and exercises and my coaching all the time. So let's pull this together. Trust is the emotional foundation of effective leadership and collaboration. And by the way, that's just as much in your personal life as it is in your professional life. It enables leaders to build cohesive teams, to create psychologically safe environments, and to get things done through other people. Now, emotional intelligence is foundational to building trust. It provides leaders with the tools that they need to connect, to communicate, and to inspire. By developing self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills, leaders can enhance trust within their teams and within their organization, creating environments where people can truly thrive. And that's what we want. We want to create an environment where people can thrive and enjoy that success together and celebrate that together. In our world today, which is constantly changing, where uncertainty is high and where collaboration is essential to success, trust remains the currency of getting things done. And it always will when people are involved. Leaders who understand this truth will be best positioned to succeed, not just in achieving their own goals, but in building lasting, meaningful relationships that stand the test of time. That's the kind of leader I want to be. How about you? Thank you for joining us for this episode. If you have any questions about this week's episode, or maybe a suggestion for future episodes you'd like us to explore, please contact us through our website at eqfit.org. For more information and inspiration, connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube at EQFit.